Today, Christianity stands at the crossroads. By Christianity, I mean that collection of beliefs by which Christians have lived for some 1,500 years. You know that the word Christianity wasn't used until the 16th century? And that's because they never talked about Christianity as such. They talked about the Christian faith, the faith by which we live. And the faith by which we can live in the 21st century is actually very different from the Christianity that was formed in the first 4 centuries of the Christian era. Why is it different? It's because the world in which people saw themselves living then was mainly a flat earth beneath a sky, which was the dwelling place of God. That's why we've been praying ever since, Our Father who is in the sky. And the people of those days could say that Jesus ascended into heaven, and it made some sense. And the heaven to which the faithful aspired was a very real place. But we see the starry heavens above us as part of a space-time universe. But where the ancients talked about spirit as the eternal substance of reality, we talk about physical energy. Physical energy can change in form tremendously, but it can never vanish into non-existence. That's what we call one of the laws of thermodynamics. And where they explained natural phenomena in terms of gods and spirits, we do so in terms of electrons and quarks and nuclear forces. And where they explained living creatures as fleshly embodiments of spirit, we talk of organisms identifiable by DNA and chromosomes, immune systems and amino acids. We see ourselves as human organisms who feel through our bodies and think through our brains and nervous systems. And for us, knowledge is what is open to public investigation. What we know and believe, whether it be in science or philosophy or religion, is the result of human experience and the way we interpret it. And this universe is awe-inspiring, not only in its dimensions of time and space, but in what it can do. It has the capacity to create out of itself ever more complex and beautiful patterns of energy. First, so the scientists tell us, came the Big Bang, and then the slow accumulation of gases into stars, and then the explosion of some of those stars called supernovas into stardust, and then the formation of that dust into planets, and then the evolution of life on a planet like ours. The universe is one continuing process of change, and it manifests both growth and decay, and has been doing so for 15 billion years. So the universe is all there is. There's nothing outside of it. As far as we know, there was nothing before it. The old account of creation in Genesis served our forebears very well, but it has now been replaced by another. We shouldn't be very surprised about that, because at the very time when the Bible was being put together, the very earliest story of creation was already dated. It's in Genesis 2 and 3. And a new story of creation was being formed, a brand new one. It's in Genesis 1. And the ancient scholars got over that problem simply by recording them both. And we're not only in this universe, we are a part of it. Our very existence, our continuing life is dependent upon it. That's why our oldest human ancestors believed their destiny to be in the lap of the gods. We know extremely little about what takes place in this universe. We have no idea, and probably will never know, whether there is life somewhere else in the universe. And life on this planet has been evolving over some 3 billion years. And our human species emerged out of a myriad of living species, and it did so only very recently in the history of the earth, and more by accident than by design. There is no obvious reason why we should have evolved as we have. There's no reason why there should be any life at all on this planet. The origin of it is still a mystery. But because we are so dependent on the physical universe as a whole, and on this planet in particular, the natural world must be the first focus of our faith. Now, in the 21st century, we are becoming painfully aware that we are dependent upon nature again. We're having to relearn, with all our knowledge and sophistication, that it's the forces of nature that transcend us. Now, to understand what it means to have faith in the 21st century, we have to go back to basics. Indeed, Mother Earth is forcing us to do it. We are today relearning our absolute need for pure water, pure air, healthy food, adequate shelter, and the regeneration of the species. The overcoming of all threats to human survival have once again become the religious issues of our day. And there's much about the world to foster faith. The world has an awe-inspiring capacity to produce order and design out of chaos, and to create beauty in flowers, in the natural world. It's true that there are earthquakes, storms, disease, what we call natural disasters. But on the other hand, at each spring, the earth manifests itself with an awe-inspiring capacity to renew itself. The beauty we see through the microscope is breathtaking. The story of evolution itself is spellbinding. And no one has expressed that more dramatically than the devout scientist and Jesuit priest Teilhard de Chardin. In his magnum opus, The Phenomenon of Man, Teilhard gives us a vision of the evolving universe in all its breathtaking grandeur and awe-inspiring mystery. I read it over one weekend, not being able to put it down. It was a religious experience. Most impressive of all is the way Teilhard builds into his vision two great thresholds of change. First came the transition on this planet from non-life to life, resulting in the emergence of the biosphere, the sphere of life around the planet. And within the biosphere, and only in the species we call Homo sapiens, came a second transition from life to reflective thought, resulting in the emergence of what he called the noosphere. It refers to that thin layer of self-critical thought which surrounds the earth today. And such is the creativity present in the self-evolving universe that it has the potential not only to become alive, but to think. As cosmic energy organized itself into ever more complex patterns, so its potential for consciousness reached ever higher levels. And in the growing self-consciousness of humankind, the universe has become aware of itself. Our minds are the mirror through which the universe sees and understands itself. Now, this whole new way of understanding reality is today's equivalent of the traditional Christian doctrine of the Incarnation. The ancient Christian fathers tried to do justice to their experience in this way. They tried to unite the faith in God they had inherited from Judaism and the impact made by the man Jesus of Nazareth. And so they said the divine creative Father had become incarnate in Jesus. But now, and in an even grander way, we may say the creativity of the cosmos has enfleshed itself in the earthly species we call humankind. Now that the human race is being forced to play the role of God with regard to the sustaining of earthly life, the doctrine of the Incarnation has taken on a striking new relevance for this global, secular, and ecological world. But how did this modern world come into being? A world so different from that in which Christianity assumed its classical form. Well, it's an indisputable fact of history that the modern world emerged out of the Christian West. True, it's not Christian in the traditional sense, but neither is it anti-Christian. It's best referred to as post-Christian. And it is post-Christian in much the same way as Christianity itself is post-Jewish. Just as Christianity emerged out of Judaism, finding perhaps that Jewish practices had become a bit of a straitjacket from which it had to explode, to explore its new freedom. So the modern secular world has emerged out of the straitjacket of classical Christianity. Now, there is much in the modern secular world to praise. The growth of democracy, the affirmation of basic human rights, the abolition of slavery, the rejection of racism, the emancipation of women, the acceptance of homosexuals. And they've all happened in the last 100 years. And as the early Christians looked into the future with faith, they drew upon their experience, and they came to express their faith in terms of the Holy Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Well, that formula has become meaningless to lots of people. Yet, like the ancients, we too must draw upon our experiences and current knowledge to express our faith. And strangely enough, it also leads to a trinity, what I have called a secular, this worldly trinity. And the first element of this trinity is the self-evolving universe itself. Here we observe cosmic creativity on the grand and most awe-inspiring scale. It brought forth life on the earth. It gave us human life, human intelligence, and the capacity to love. And the second element of the Trinity is the evolving human species. We humans manifest cosmic creativity in the way we have become a self-made species. What makes us human is not primarily our DNA. We share most of that with the higher vertebrates. What makes us human is what we have collectively created over hundreds of thousands of years. Language, ideas, knowledge, religion, science, everything that goes to make up human culture. That makes us human, and we humans created it. The third element is what may be called global consciousness. That's the modern equivalent of the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. In spite of our past cultural diversity, we humans, whether we like it or not, are being drawn together at an accelerating pace. Now, these three manifestations of cosmic creativity constitute the God in whom we live and move and have our being. And as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were proclaimed to be three in one, because they were, as the ancients said, of the same substance, so for us, the self-creating universe, the self-evolving human species, the emerging global consciousness are of one substance because of the cosmic creativity which manifests itself in all three. Clearly, this understanding of the secular Trinity actually owes quite a deal to the doctrines of the Incarnation and the Holy Trinity. And the more we become a harmonious society, relating in a healthy way to one another and to the planet, the more confident we can be about the future. So the simplest way of expressing faith in the 21st century is to speak of cosmic creativity, in that we can put our trust, and it is to be found in the earth itself, in the human species, and in the emerging global consciousness. Amen.